experience forced displacement, and they continuously experience this tragedy. IDPs are defined by three letters: internally displaced persons, meaning they are displaced, forcibly displaced, away from their places of habitual residence, but within the boundaries of the state.
I think in the Philippines we are very fortunate because the Philippine government actually has ratified many of the international standards that pertain to international human rights treaties that protect human rights in general. And these obligations are of course applicable to the rights of the IDPs themselves. So these international standards, which are part not only of the obligation of the government to follow, but they are integral to the law of the land. So we are, of course, bound as a nation, as a government, to follow these international standards.
Guiding principle on internal displacement is a set of principles. In other words, it is non-binding. It is a text which belongs to the body of soft law, but nonetheless is part, as customary law, as part of the international humanitarian law body, and is the only sort of point of reference around which we can build a consensus to engage in a dialogue, preferably with states, but sometimes also with non-state actors, to sort of put forward the notion that rights of internally displaced persons, i.e. persons undergoing forced displacement, have rights even during the time they are experiencing this forced displacement. And it only forms a consensual platform based upon which organizations, people, individuals of goodwill can engage in a dialogue, sometimes putting pressure, sometimes reminding the states of their obligations towards their own citizens who are also experiencing forced displacement. The United Nations Guiding Principles on Internal Displacement, paragraph 5, 6, 7, paragraph B, alinea 2, it sets out the conditions upon which a state, but the prime responsibility to deal with ensuring that assistance and protection is afforded to citizens of a state undergoing forced displacement, first and foremost lies with the state.
The Philippines is typhoon. It's visited by typhoons all the time, and so you have a situation where the people had to undergo this misery, this terrible thing, over and above what they have to keep on, coping with year after year.
Balancing the application of the principles of internal displacement is the basic application of human rights principles. One of which is participation. Okay? Participation of whom? Of those directly affected. And it so happens these are the evacuees, or what you call the IDPs. Then by all means, in all the affairs, in their management, preparation, resettlement, transition, permanent or wise, they must be heard. IDPs must be given a voice. They must be given the time and the space, okay, to ventilate everything coming from them. After all, they will be the owners of this development. Okay.
Talagang nag-i-struggle. Hindi nila alam kung paano ang daily lives nila. saan sila mag-i-start. So, pumasok, ang daming mga agencies pumasok. So, binibigyan sila lahat-lahat pagkain. Kasi pag transfer nila dito, may bahay na po sila. And then nilagyan sila ng tubig. In 3 months time, may ilaw na po sila. So, bali kompleto na. Ang ano lang talaga, yung daily needs nila.
Where do you start? And how do you do that? That in itself a challenge. In the meantime, we have human beings, regardless of their status, who are forcibly displaced, who are eagerly waiting for a solution where to resume their new life.
Kailan ba? Diba? Buti sana kung ngayon agad okay lang. Pero yung pinag-uusapan natin dito is panahon. Yung tagal na paggawa nila doon, hanggang ngayon nga, may nagawa na ba? Buti sana kung yung paghintay namin ngayon, matutulog na lang muna kami, tapos pagising namin, matutulog kami for a year. Para pagising namin, lipat na. Hindi naman po ganun, di ba? Dadaan pa rin kami sa sakripisyo. Ang laking sakripisyo pa rin.
Ano nila yan, Adida? Ganun, ano?
The emergency phase is a combination of several tools: evacuation center, barangay halls, basketball court, tents, plastic sheetings, debris from the ruins, corrugated iron sheets. That's the emergency phase. You stabilize the population. They are traumatized, they are suffering, they have nowhere to go, and you use a combination of these measures, right? The emergency phase. At the same time starts the planning process for a intermediary temporary phase where there is agreement that we build temporary shelter quickly, very often with light materials. While this is happening, the third steps, which consist of building and planning and then building a permanent shelter, starts. When you examine these 3 phases of shelter strategy to contribute resolving displacement, come to think of who is responsible. The provision of durable solution, let's be clear, is a process which is time consuming.
Durable solutions actually has been part and parcel of international standard development all over the world. And there is what we call the IASC, Interagency Standing Committee framework for durable solutions for IDPs. This is a framework that's being used all over the world and as well in the Philippines to determine how IDPs can attain durable solutions and when they do attain durable solutions. Among the very important benchmarks with regard to the attainment of durable solutions is, for example, the fact that the IDPs will have the opportunity to genuinely participate in decision-making concerning their future after displacement. And part of this, importantly, is that they are genuinely consulted. And in fact, even better, they are part of the management and planning of their either return to their communities, their return to the original places of origin, or their integration of in the place of refuge or settlement elsewhere. Another important benchmark is, of course, housing, land, and property rights, because housing, land, and property rights will determine as well whether or not the internally displaced persons have been able to settle into their normal life. Another benchmark is the right to livelihood. Naturally, because internally displaced persons have the right to work, the right to livelihood, and this will also be important and significant to determine whether IDPs will be able to stand on their own, and so that they will not be at the mercy, if you want, or always at the receiving end of humanitarian assistance, particularly in protracted displacement.
Actually, hindi lang po sila nakapag-aral. Dito lang po sa loob ng grandstand. On and off yung punta niya sa school. Hindi po talaga as in, lagi siya nakakapunta kasi nga, isa is malayo po kami kasi nasa talon-talon yung school niya. Pangalawa po is yung financial problem kasi nga wala akong kita daily, kaya yung baong pamasahe ng anak ko, nahihirapan ako. Minsan kasi na-absent na siya, hindi na yung dati. Dati na sa mga, yung normal pa yung ano namin, wala pang siege nangyari. Okay po yung pag-aaral ng mga anak ko. Sa ngayon po, masasabi ko talaga na hindi na po talaga okay yung pag-aaral ng mga anak ko. Ang sa tingin ko po, yung dapat gawin ng gobyerno po sa amin, yun i-assure po talaga sa amin na pwede po kaming babalik kung saan po kami dati nakatira.
Naturally, there will also be some balancing, for example, with regard to the safety and security of the IDPs, but in the end of the day, it is the interest of the IDPs and the IDP communities that should prevail when the Philippine government has to make policy decisions to protect the IDP rights. There are discussions of how we can actually promote these rights. And one of the greatest, very good developments right now is the fact that in the legislature of the Philippines, that is the House of Representatives and the Senate, there are currently bills, House bills, one House bill and one Senate bill that have been drafted, developed, and are being discussed to protect the human rights of IDPs. These bills, the bill at the House of Representatives have already been adopted. We are now looking for the adoption of the Senate bill, and we are looking forward that if not this year in 2014, most probably in 2015, we will actually have our bill that will become law, and this law will be called a law to protect the human rights of internally displaced persons in the Philippines.